To cut to the chase, this actually took place in New Jersey, and this happened to one of my neighbors who was in New Jersey. Her name was Samantha, and she was about maybe 18 years old. She was visiting her family who lived in New Jersey, as she lived in Canada for a couple years. But of course, her family moved back to New Jersey while she decided to stay in Canada for a bit. Now, it was around maybe close to the summertime, so Samantha decided to go visit her family in New Jersey. Now, sometime in Burlington, New Jersey, she had found what seemed to be the abandoned Chuck E. Cheese's. Now, she couldn't really point out where in Burlington that the location of the abandoned Chuck E. Cheese place was, but the Chuck E. Cheese place was abandoned at the time. Samantha pulled over into the parking lot as she had to answer a phone call from somebody. But as she was answering the phone, she looked to realize that she was in the Chuck E. Cheese abandoned area. She remembers she went to Chuck E. Cheese when she lived there as a kid, and it didn't age any bit. But the only thing difference is that it looks abandoned. Most likely because the company ran out of business or something. So with that being said, Samantha decided to maybe go explore. She walked up towards the windows and looked inside. She couldn't really see much, but she definitely saw no one there. She decided that she would look over to see if anyone was in Chuck E. Cheese's. But finally, she realized that the door was locked when she tried to open it. She managed to find a broken window and climb through. Once she was inside, she began to look around. There was graffiti, beer bottles, and etc. There were places where tubes would be or would have been, along with arcade games and etc. She ended up taking a look around the abandoned Chuck E. Cheese. It was very quiet, so she looked around. Of course, she went to the bathrooms and they were covered in graffiti. But as she went over there, she realized that the lights did not work. So she had to use the flashlight on her phone. As she used that to light her way, she looked over, but she could see no one. All of a sudden, she heard a laugh. A laugh that sounded like it came from a child. Samantha called out if anyone was there, but to no avail. Checked every bathroom stall in the girls' bathroom, but couldn't see anybody. When she looked at the mirror and realizes that the taps somehow were still working, but they were rust water. When she looked up in the mirror, she saw that there was a little girl staring at her. Samantha grabbed her stuff and ran out of the Chuck E. Cheese's. She finally went back to her car and drove off back to her parents' house. She looked back to see if anyone was following her, but there was no one there. Now, Samantha didn't bother to tell anybody about this experience or report it to the cops, as she was afraid that she would be in trouble for trespassing. But Samantha went back to the Chuck E. Cheese, the abandoned place, when she was heading back to Canada. But since then, there was nobody there, and she did not even see anyone there. She just can't begin to explain how terrifying it was to hear a child's laughter inside of an abandoned place. This still freaks her out to this day, even though it's been a while since this event happened. This took place sometime when I was about maybe 12 or 13 years old. Now, some people may be thinking, why would a 12 or 13-year-old go to Chuck E. Cheese? Well, this was at the time when I was younger, and my brother was a young kid at the time. My mom used to take me and my brother to Chuck E. Cheese's maybe once or twice a year. It was a pretty neat place. You get to play the arcade games and animatronics and etc. The tubes were the fun part, which is why my brother really loved it, even when it had a race car. Now, my brother might have been maybe around 9 or 10, and I was most likely around 12 or 13. I can't remember the exact date, but my mom decided to pull me and my brother out of school early to go to Chuck E. Cheese's. We left around 11 in the morning, but of course I went to school for a little bit and stayed with my brother, but my mom came and got me, and we went to Chuck E. Cheese. We loved to go to Chuck E. Cheese's all the time when we were younger, especially with the animatronics. I liked the older days when Chucky was really neat and cool, but I'm sure most of you guys can agree. While my mom was at a booth waiting for our pizza, my brother and I were getting the tokens and we were playing some games. However, I ended up going over to see the Chucky animatronics that were out, gave him a hug and high five and etc. Same thing with the other animatronics. One of the animatronics somehow was staring at me. I think it might have been Chucky. Yeah, it was Chucky. He gave me a really creepy and really weird look. I did not know why he was making a weird look, but I decided to not even shrug it off, but kind of was confused. Then I ended up just doing my own thing, minding my business. When the pizza came, my brother and I ate the pizza, and it was actually pretty good. However, I looked over at the stage, and the Chucky animatronic was still staring at me. I felt a little bit uncomfortable, but I thought maybe the animatronics was malfunctioning and maybe not working the best. It's happened a few times before at my times when I went to Chuck E. Cheese, but this one was taking the cake. When I went to the bathroom after the pizza, I heard something walked in, and it sounded like the Chucky animatronic sound. It had some animatronic sounds, and I know it was Chucky. I didn't even know, and I honestly was really scared, thinking he was gonna break down one of the stall doors. Eventually, he didn't even stop and stare at my stall door. I was staying as quiet as I could, not making a sound. Eventually, whatever it was left the bathroom, and I got out of there quickly. When I got out of there quickly, I ended up telling my mom about the Chucky animatronic. My mom ended up talking to one of the employees about it, and one of the employees looked over at the malfunctioned animatronic Chucky, and especially when he walked into the bathroom of the girls' room while I was there. Now, the very confusing thing is that the animatronic never did that. Now, I'm just still confused on why the Chucky animatronic did. Maybe it was somebody in a costume or something, but I honestly have no idea. I think maybe the malfunction of the animatronic was messed up. But yet again, who is to say? Maybe it was somebody in a costume, maybe trying to fool us, but I have a feeling it was just an animatronic. I still will not know to this day, and this honestly doesn't really scare me. I found it creepy, but I honestly still think that this animatronic Chucky was really perverted. Now, this took place sometime when I was maybe a kid, maybe 11 or 10. Now, this actually happened to me, and I was on a play date with one of my neighbors who had two kids, but they were homeschooled. Since then, since I've been going to a public elementary school, I sometimes get play dates with my neighbors. Now, my friend, which we'll call her, her Sarah, and her brother named Michael. Sarah and Michael were pretty cool kids, and they were really fun. Now, Michael apparently was 5, and along with Sarah, who happens to be 5 as well. Now, my brother was younger at the time of this story, so he was around 7 or 8, and he was friends with them. I was friends as well, but of course, I decided to take that day off, as my mom gave me a choice to go to school or take the day off to do Chuck E. Cheese. I decided to go to Chuck E. Cheese as I needed some break off of school, as I had been going through some issues with school life, having some assignments that I needed to catch up on, and etc. While we were playing at Chuck E. Cheese, I was saving my tickets as I wanted to get a really big prize. I looked at some really neat prizes and decided to buy the best one I find. Now, as I was saving my tickets and playing games and whatnot, mostly games that I was really good at and all that, when I won the jackpot at a few games though, then there was this strange man. This man seemed to be I guess, in his 30s. I thought maybe he came with his kids, but he didn't seem to have any kids. He all looked like homeless, but this was actually pretty weird. Whatever this man did, he looked over at me when I was getting more tickets, which means I was grabbing some more tickets from the jackpot. He went up to me and said, "Hey, do you want tickets? I got some more in my car if you want." he said. Me being 10 or 11 years old, I honestly shook my head no. I realized that he might be trying to kidnap me or something much worse. He ended up grabbing me as I started screaming, but of course I eventually kicked him so much hard that he finally got to let me go. My neighbor apparently saw it and phoned the cops while the employees tried to hold the man back. The police eventually arrested the man, and I had no idea what this man was capable of doing. But I ended up leaving Chuck E. Cheese's early after I got enough tickets. We were planning to stay a little longer, but I got a few prizes at least. Now, it wasn't until a few years later when the conversation was brought up with my mom. I asked my mom about the time I went to Chuck E. Cheese's and I went home a little early with my neighbor and their kids and my brother. She told me something that really sent shivers down my spine. Apparently, this man was a child predator, and he had been trying to kidnap younger kids, mainly from age 5 to maybe 16. Most of the time, he had been going to Chuck E. Cheese's, and he had been arrested for kidnapping children and even doing horrible things to them. He had escaped from prison, but eventually he was put back into prison. And I'm glad he's in prison, because that's where he should stay. I have no idea what would have happened if no one even noticed me struggling to get away from this man. But chances are something terrible would have happened to me if I even went any further with the man. Chances are I would not be alive today. This took place sometime, I guess, in 2016. How do I know this is because one of my closest friends, named Mike, used to work at Chuck E. Cheese. And at the time of this story, this honestly really frightened him a bit, or more or less to an extent. Now, Mike was working at Chuck E. Cheese's in Florida, which of course, he was living with my house for a couple of years. But eventually, in Canada, he ended up deciding to go work to the United States Chuck E. Cheese, which he moved there. Of course, he told me this story once, and it really frightens me. Basically, he was working at Chuck E. Cheese when 3 armed men with masks and even guns started breaking through the Chuck E. Cheeses at night. Apparently, Mike and a few other employees were closing. Eventually, at the time, he had went over to the phone to call 911 while the operator was sending police. Eventually, gunshots were thrown, followed by screaming. 2 of the workers unfortunately died, but Mike eventually somehow survived, but had a couple injuries. Mike never did night shifts at Chuck E. Cheese's again, and I'm sorry if this is short. Mike rarely remembers this, and he honestly had no idea what would have happened if he was killed. Chances are he would not be alive to this day. He still works at the Chuck E. Cheese's in Florida, but he never did night shifts again. Not after this incident.